Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today in the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about symbolism and the value of symbolic languages as a tool to navigate through the invisible and intangible divine omnipresence. Listen as we use what is visible and tangible to uncover and reveal what can't be seen, heard, touched, tasted, or smelled. In this show, we will explain the progression of consciousness from sense to soul by imagining the stairway to heaven. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul by hitching your wagon to a star. Swami, I see the title of today's show is Building the Stairway to Heaven. What do you mean by that?
When we use a phrase like, do you see what I see? Do you hear what I hear? This can be perceived as a personal sense or divine egoism. Simply by switching awareness, am I on earth or in heaven, mortal or immortal? We have a choice, and it's up to us to make the right choice and rise into immortal identity. And in this show, we'll discuss a way of doing this with scientific certainty by creating this mental landscape that will support the divine principle. And it reminds me of being able to learn how to play music by being able to read music. A music sheet is a schematic. It's a blueprint for how to hit the right note at the right time for the right amount of time. And the schematic that we will use for this graduation from sense to soul will be found in revelations in the Bible, what we call the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle. When you put the fixed signs of the zodiac on the angles, the cusp of the first house, fourth house, seventh house, and 10th house, the zodiac lines up in a way the planets that rule the signs are in alignment with the signs they rule, starting with Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon, and the sun. And the more we start to understand this idea, these are symbols. A symbol is much greater than equal to something. And we can start to use these symbols to help us develop an awareness for what's invisible and intangible, everywhere, always.
So, Swami, getting back to the title, Building the Stairway to Heaven, kind of makes it sound to me like there's something we need to do, maybe build a foundation. So where would we begin?
To expand on this idea of a stairway to heaven, we can begin to understand the function of symbol to help consciousness move beyond the veiling power of the mind-body complex. Herb Fitch, in Realization of Oneness, class 29A, gave us this important point, and I'll read it. We are learning not about a man. We are learning the nature of our self, of which that man is a symbol. End of quote. Now that self he mentions is with a capital S, the divine self. And as Mary Baker Eddy told us, we can't put an infinite mind in a finite form. And so we have to somehow figure out how to get consciousness out of this mortal sense of existence. The symbolism we have started to use is this idea of the body of Christ. And of course, it is a mental image, it's an astral image that uses the 7 personal planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac. Astrology is a very good symbol for divine mind, for spirit, for the changeless state of being, for intelligence. One of the things about astrological events is you never hear the solar eclipse is going to be 2 days late this year. The solar eclipse isn't going to happen this year. They happen exactly where and when they are intended to happen. This logic, order, and predictability gives us a very good template for the intelligence of the divine creative principle. Also, the fact these zodiacal signs move so little, they are a good representation for the changeless state of being.
I like when Herb says we're not learning about a man, we're learning about the nature of ourself, and like you said, with a capital S. So how would we get started to learn about the nature of the divine self?
Yeah, here we begin to use the physical appearance to reflect the consciousness of the individual until the inner and the outer are one. Virtue is a great indicator of the human in the adult state. We use the Boy Scout law as a guide because there are 12 of them. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, cheerful, obedient, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. What we call building a mental landscape to support the divine principle, because Bicknell Young says, if you have one humanly, there is one divinely.
So I think it's interesting. I did go on Google because I was curious about the Boy Scout law. I have something here that's on Google. It says the Scout Law's founders drew inspiration from the Bushido Code of the Japanese samurai, the laws of honor of the American Indians, and the code of chivalry of European knights. Seems like a lot of symbolism there too as well. What are your thoughts?
Number 12, remember there were 12 knights of the Round Table. Jesus had 12 disciples. Hercules had 12 labors. And in Buddhism, they have the 12 interdependent origins. So when you're looking for a template in how to build your stairway to heaven, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Using what we have here will work just fine. You can replace terminology or you can add on. Like, say, for example, the personal planets. Up to Saturn, we can see the planets with our naked eye. And that's an important thing. This will establish what is known as the personal sense of self. When you get to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that is referred to as transpersonal planets. Once we transcend the limits of sense level awareness, is really where this is going to begin. But we have to walk reason through the open door of revelation. There is a developmental process the human being must undertake in order to qualify to be able to surrender this personal sense of self and reunite with this larger sense of self. If you have this mental imagery of a staircase and you work with Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon, and the sun, that gives you something outside of yourself that is visible and tangible and also expands identity far beyond the limits of a personal physical body. And this is all necessary if you want to grow psychologically and spiritually. You can also do this by substituting the planets with the words that Mary Baker Eddy uses for God. You could make that interchangeable, which is what we've done. even say, for example, the 12 signs of the zodiac, we converted them into the Boy Scout law. When you are in a position, a physical position, in a sequence of postures, you are representing a particular zodiacal sign, and it also has an attribute associated with it. This helps you organize the information, and at the same time, it gives you something you can live out from, keeping you in constant relation with the divine idea. Because all our problems stem from the simple fact we are unconscious to the divine omnipresence.
So, Swami, you're describing there might be to some people maybe a lot of information to try to get them to understand and put it into practice. So how can you equate that to a system that could help them learn and integrate the information?
Without song sheets, it may become difficult to accurately remember the music. The oldest ink is better than the best memory. In this plight from sense to soul, we develop the mind-body complex physically and mentally, because the physical body is a manifestation of the mortal mind, and divine mind is before mortal thought and above corporeal sense. And only reason or humans in the adult state qualify for revelation. And the idea of using the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle as the schematic or song sheet to ensure the liftoff out of mortal sense into divine consciousness is a wise choice, because that symbolism is found all over the planet. The four evangelists in Christianity were symbolized by the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle. The Sphinx in Egypt is made of the head of the man, the body of the bull, the paws of the lion, the wings of the phoenix, which was the eagle-like bird out of which its own ashes would regenerate itself. That's a better representation for Scorpio than an actual scorpion. It's all symbolism, and the idea here isn't really to get caught up in the symbol. You don't want to just read the song sheets. You want to play the music. Or in a similar way, you don't just read books about snowboarding. You want to snowboard. And that's exactly what we're trying to learn here with divine science. You don't just want to talk about endless possibilities, but we want to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty.
I like the idea of having symbols to remind us of certain things. Like I was just made aware of some symbols regarding Christmas, like the Christmas wreath, the candy canes, Christmas trees. But then once I found out what they really meant, now when I look at those things, it's something completely different than what I was doing for years. I think it's a telltale sign. We need symbols to remind us, but not to get caught up into the humanistic view of them.
Well, see, the problem is, I like what the Tibetans say. You need the finger to point to the moon, but it is woe unto them who mistaken the finger for the moon, for they shall never understand what the finger is, nor the bright light of the moon. And so when we get caught up in the symbol and we don't understand the intention is for us to pierce beyond what is visible and tangible and become aware of what is invisible and intangible, then the symbol becomes the barrier.
We're going to pause out here to a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes, and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So we just wanted to get back to talking more about diving deeper into the symbolism. And since it is Christmas time, as I said earlier, I can't look at a wreath on somebody's front door without thinking about what that really means. But also at the same time, when I research what the candy cane is supposed to symbolize, I kind of really have to rethink that to be more into what we're talking about now, the spirituality of trying to become one with the divine.
Right. A lot of the symbolism is still being interpreted by the old theology, the belief in two powers, which is basically the law of karma. And the entire thing is driven by belief. And we really want to start to come out of that. In order to do that with success, you have to have a principle. And the principle has to be the allness of the divine creative omnipresence. And where the divine omnipresence is the power of omnipresence, and divine power is the power of perfection. So everywhere we must have to understand is life is perfect, it's whole, it's complete, changeless, without beginning or end. Once we have this influence from the old theology, and we fall back into the good and evil world of energy, we're in the trap. The idea here is to bring us to the kingdom of heaven while we are still in a physical form.
So you did mention the word omnipresence just a bit ago. What more do we need to do to understand what that is?
Well, again, omnipresence means everywhere, always. Once you have accepted the omnipresence of the divine principle of perfection, everywhere, always, we graduate to the positive side of spirit instead of the negative side of the mental material protection. No longer believing in a mortal sense of self, we advance forward into understanding the one immortal self. The concept of a stairway is building a mental landscape to rise above corporeal sense and abide in the secret place of the Most High. And in order to do this, health and matter must be given up for health and spirit. We have to rebirth the physical body in the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence. And once you have internalized the invisible, intangible as your symbol for validation, then you have the capacity now to, quote unquote, love God. Then you can be absent from the body and present with the Lord. But if we continue to hang on to this personal sense of self, and we continue to cater to animal magnetism, instincts, appetites, preservation, and survival, then we will never purify ourselves to the extent we will have sensitivity and awareness for what is invisible and intangible.
It's really interesting you were talking about accepting the omnipresence, the divine principle to be everywhere, always. And I can remember growing up or being taught we had to physically die to become one with God, to be with God. And that's just simply really not the case anymore.
Well, yes and no. See, we must die to a personal sense of self, but you do not kill the physical body. In fact, just by expiring, when the body goes naturally because you are a branch cut off from the vine and you wither and die, just dying is not going to bring you to enlightenment. In fact, if you've ever read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that's exactly what it will tell you. When you are in the cycle of death and rebirth, your chance when you expire is increased a little bit. But if you haven't rebirthed your body in spirit, if you have not given up the belief in mortality while you are in the physical body, then you will continue to crave existence in form. And the secret here is to be liberated from this belief in life and death, good and bad, this belief in two powers, because it's ever-ending, never-ending. It's a cycle. But once you have rebirthed the body in the life force and you have walked reason through the open door of revelation, and you now know yourself in the way that you are known by the Creator, then you know the truth. Life is perfect. It's whole. It's complete.
So the whole concept of this stairway, building the stairway, I think most people think of a stairway as having steps to it. So there has to be, the first step, a second step, and so on. Is that something we need to also understand, that there are steps that are to be in place before we can get to rise above the corporeal sense?
Yeah, human development has always been portrayed symbolically in three phases. It's Christianity. It's the crucifixion of the body, the resurrection of the Son, the reunion with the Father. The hero's journey is the separation, the journey, the return. Or even, say, for example, the idea of the caterpillar goes into a chrysalis and then becomes a butterfly. There are stages in development in order for us to complete the cycle. Or graduating from sense to soul, moving consciousness from what we would call Muladhara chakra in Kriya Yoga, or Ephesus in Revelations, all the way up to Sahasrara chakra or Laodicea. Depending on what symbolic language you're using, they are laying out a progression. And of course, there's no cut and dry one way that this happens, because everyone is different. Just like there aren't any two snowflakes that are the same, there are no two human bodies that are identical. And of course, it's important to understand that uniqueness on one level. But by the same token, each unique reflection is really a symbol of the changeless, perfect, divine principle.
So in the summary, I had mentioned the phrase, "it hits your wagon to a star." Would you describe for us what that should mean?
Well, of course, for me, it means the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle in Revelations. Why reinvent the wheel? When you paint the astral body, also known as body of Christ, we have a go-to, something to climb upon to get us before thought and above corporeal sense. Symbols like Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon, and the sun can be expanded into 7 churches, 7 chakras, or 7 words in Christian Science. Sure, it's complicated, but what isn't? Even music opens up from 7 notes to 12 tones. Coming back to the zodiac as a template for the staircase, we can explore the connection between the planets and the signs with symbolic rulership. When you use the 7 personal planets and understand how each planet rules zodiacal signs, we can make this a checklist to measure consciousness by assigning characteristics and attributes to each sign of the zodiac. Is a great way for us to outline this divine self. And then, of course, working with what we call your highest understanding of right. In the Bible, where it says, "Be ye perfect as your Father." When we are graduating from being reactive, emotional, controlled by world thought. And we start to make our choices based on human intelligence, and we are developing human will so that we are able to control how we think, and we're able to regulate our behavior based on a standard that is leading towards spiritual growth. This is how we develop ourselves physically and mentally. And this stairway to heaven is just a way of learning how complicated it really is. When you look at something like Saturn, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Saturn is associated with time. Time is measured in now and then. And of course, if you spiritualize time, you have to graduate to everywhere, always, because spirit is not in time. And so this would be very similar to the idea of the caterpillar now goes into a chrysalis, where we go from being careless, emotional, indulgent, excitable, and now we become careful, intelligent, ambitious, and it's different. Once you have graduated from there, and you do it for not just Saturn, but say, for example, now you've got 6 other principles that you have to start to cultivate and develop. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. Jupiter is associated with space, and space is measured in here and there. Well, in spirit, there is no here and there. We have to graduate to everywhere. And again, what we're doing is we're taking information and we're educating our thought up to spiritual apprehension with the intention of eventually knowing the truth. Life is perfect, it's whole, it's complete. Getting ourselves to the point where we at some time will walk reason through the open door of revelation, and we will give up this mortal sense of existence and reattune ourselves with the truth of life. Life is hid with Christ in God. And when you break that down, what does that look like when I'm doing it? Well, Christ is what's going to make the divine creation comprehensive to human consciousness. So you will be thinking differently. You will graduate from thinking with your 5 corporeal senses to now knowing with 7 spiritual senses.
Yeah, I know it's really important. I understand now, too, I've been working with, you just can't think or say, I am spiritual. You have to go much deeper than that.
Yeah, to understand divine law, we can compare it to the principles of mathematics. However, to say the principles of mathematics are perfect, therefore my checking account is perfect, may not be true. The principles must be applied. Divine science is the same. We can't just make statements, God is all, God is good, therefore all is good. The divine principle must be applied to be known. Only reason walks through the open door of revelation. What this means is the recognition. If the divine principle is omnipresent, there is only one life, everywhere, always. When God is all, who are you? Who am I? In the light of this truth, the personal sense of I is lifted into divine egoism. There is no you or me or anyone else. Only the divine, one perfect, omnipresent life is everywhere, always.
Well, that completes our show for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of those homepages, as you scroll down, you'll see several buttons that you could press that would further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul by hitching your wagon to a star. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga revelation. Namaste.